Soft morning sunlight filtered through the tall glass windows of the bridal suite at a vineyard estate in Sonoma Valley. Juliette Monroe's wedding dress swayed gently in the breeze, slipping through the open window, a striking contrast to the storm inside her chest. Today was supposed to be the happiest day of her life, the day she married Daniel Sterling, a tech entrepreneur admired throughout Silicon Valley. But it had been 45 minutes since the ceremony was meant to start. Her phone remained silent. No message, no explanation. Her best friend Lucy sat beside her, hands trembling as she tried calling again. "Still no answer," she whispered, worry etched across her face. Juliette stared at her reflection in the mirror. The glow was gone. All that remained were red-rimmed eyes and lipstick faded to the edges of a forced smile. She bit her lip to keep tears at bay, but her hands were shaking. The door creaked open. It wasn't Daniel. It was Sebastian Sterling, Daniel's older brother, a man Julia had met only 3 times, each encounter cloaked in silence and a chill that never lifted. He was dressed in a sharp black suit, his gaze unreadable, as if he had known this moment would come. "Juliette," he spoke, voice low and steady. "Daniel's not coming." Silence. Juliette felt the world stop. The garden bird song, the distant violin drifting from below, all of it fell mute. "I'm sorry," Sebastian continued, stepping forward. "But I have a proposal." She turned toward him slowly, eyes brimming with disbelief, pain, and growing anger. But Sebastian didn't waver. He stood tall, certain, like a man who believed this day was never truly meant for Daniel at all. Juliette stood frozen, Sebastian's words sinking like lead into the hollow of her chest. "Daniel's not coming." There was no blame in his voice, no surprise, just a fact, cold and stark. "Is this some kind of twisted game between the two of you?" she snapped, her voice hoarse. "Because I'm not your pawn." "I'm not joking," Sebastian said evenly. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, a handwritten note from Daniel. Just a few rushed lines. "I'm sorry, I can't do this. You deserve better." The floor beneath her seemed to shift. Every detail she'd planned, every feeling she'd poured into this day, dissolved in an instant. She stepped back, clutching her dress, lips trembling as tears brimmed in her eyes. "So what do you want from me?" she asked, voice cracking. Sebastian met her gaze head-on. "I want to save you from this." "How?" "By marrying you." Silence. The kind that wraps around you like ice, numbing everything but the thundering of your heart. Juliette laughed, sharp and bitter. "Are you insane? I don't even know you." "You don't have to pretend to love me," he replied. "This would be a business arrangement. 1 year. After that, you walk away, no questions, no strings." She stared at him. Why? For appearances? For family pride? Or something deeper, something unspoken? "And why should I trust you?" Sebastian moved toward the window and pushed it open. Below, whispers and camera clicks. The media had arrived, ready to feast on her humiliation. "Because I'm the only one here who doesn't want to see you destroyed," he said quietly. "And I came prepared, just in case this happened." "You mean you expected Daniel to abandon me?" Small nod. "I know my brother." Juliette turned away, her heart shattering. This wedding had never truly been hers, just a well-dressed illusion. And now the only person reaching for her was the man she barely knew, but the only one who hadn't left. She swallowed hard, turned back to him. "Fine, 1 year." Sebastian nodded. 1 year. They shook hands. No vows, no romance, just an agreement. But neither of them knew that something irreversible had already begun in that moment. The wedding felt like a silent play. No applause, no laughter, just stunned glances, tense hands, and smiles that cracked beneath layers of makeup. Juliette walked slowly beside Sebastian, every step on the white-petaled aisle weighing like a question she didn't know how to answer. She was no longer the bride, dreaming of forever. She was the understudy, forced into the spotlight, reading lines she hadn't rehearsed. When the officiant asked them to seal their vows with a kiss, her entire body tensed. But Sebastian leaned in gently, pressing his lips to hers, soft, careful, like a quiet promise. I won't hurt you. It wasn't romantic in a fairy tale sense, but it was unforgettable. The reception was brief. Daniel was nowhere to be seen, as if he had never existed in the first place. The toasts felt hollow, the champagne flat. Juliet smiled and nodded, but it wasn't her they were talking to. It was the version of her that survived the scandal. As the evening faded, Sebastian brought her to the penthouse, a sleek tower rising above downtown San Francisco. Everything inside gleamed, polished floors, towering glass windows, golden light draping every surface like a perfectly curated dream. Sebastian showed her to a room. Your space, he said, voice neutral. The wardrobe's stocked. There's a small studio if you ever feel like painting. Juliet said nothing. She stepped inside. The room smelled faintly of new wood. Everything was in place. Too perfect. She felt like a misplaced object inside a catalog. She changed out of the wedding dress. Standing before the mirror in a silk nightgown someone else had picked out for her, Juliet saw a stranger staring back. Not the girl who painted barefoot with jazz music in the background. Not the romantic who once believed in fate. That night, she didn't sleep. She stepped onto the balcony, watching the glittering grid of city lights below. And for the first time, she realized her life had turned down a path with no map and no way back. There was no Daniel, no simple dream of a cozy house and a quiet art studio. She was now the wife of a stranger, wealthy, mysterious, and dangerous in ways she couldn't yet name. But the most terrifying thing wasn't that she had lost control. It was that her heart wasn't trembling in fear. It was trembling with something else, something she couldn't yet name. The first days living together unfolded in a rhythm neither expected. Juliet and Sebastian didn't try to grow closer, but neither walked away. They coexisted, like two distant stars orbiting in separate paths, occasionally brushing against each other in moments that felt oddly significant. In the mornings, Juliet would wake to the smell of coffee drifting from the kitchen. Always Colombian, black, no sugar, exactly how she liked it, though she never told him. At night, when she painted in the small studio, Sebastian would sometimes pause at the door. He wouldn't speak, just watch for a moment, then quietly leave. But Juliet knew he had studied every line she drew. Once she left an unfinished sketch on the table. The next morning, she found a small note beside it, written in elegant slanted handwriting. The orange in this piece reminds me of the Dolomites at sunset. Have you ever been? She was surprised. He didn't just observe, he felt, deeply. That evening, rain poured down unexpectedly. Juliet stood on the balcony, watching the storm roll in. A loud thunderclap rattled the windows. The power went out. San Francisco sparkled in the distance, but their tower plunged into darkness. Sebastian knocked gently, holding a candle. Are you all right? She nodded, but when another rumble echoed, she flinched. He led her into the studio, where the flickering candlelight painted gold shadows across the canvases. You don't like storms? He asked. Not exactly, she said softly. They just make me feel small. He was quiet for a long beat, then admitted, me too. They sat side by side on the floor, surrounded by color and quiet. The storm outside seemed far away, muffled by this strange warmth between them. Juliet turned to speak, but Sebastian was already looking at her. His eyes held something raw, like he saw parts of her she never meant to reveal. He reached out, brushing her cheek lightly, then paused. Waiting? She didn't move away. She didn't speak. It wasn't a kiss, it wasn't a promise. But it was the first moment Juliet realized she wasn't afraid of him anymore. 1 week after the blackout night, Sebastian asked a question that made Juliet pause mid-step. Would you like to get out of the city for a few days? You mean like a vacation? No, he said. I mean a small escape. They left the next morning at 6 a.m. No driver, no security, no staff, Just the two of them, a dark green Range Rover, and a jazz playlist soft enough to breathe through. They drove north, through misty hills and golden vineyards, past redwood forests and sleepy towns. Juliet didn't ask where they were going. She simply watched the scenery blur by, letting the road strip the noise from her mind. By midday, they arrived at a lake house tucked into the trees, quiet, secluded, almost untouched by time. "Have you ever brought anyone here?" Juliet asked, stepping onto the weathered wood porch. "Never," Sebastian said. "I built this place for days when silence is the only thing I want. No staff, no ringing phones, no meetings." They cooked together, messy and imperfect. Juliet burned the onions Sebastian couldn't dice without tearing up. They laughed, like two people who had forgotten how to pretend. In the daylight, Juliet painted on the back deck, the lake shimmering under soft sunlight. She felt alive again. At night, they sat by the fire, sipping red wine, talking about little things, the smell of oak in the wine, the first song they ever loved, the first time they knew what pain was. "When I was 8, Sebastian said quietly, "I brought a drawing to school. My teacher called it nonsense. I never picked up a pencil again." Juliet didn't speak. She stood, disappeared into the studio, and returned with a sketch pad, brushes, and paint. She set them before him. "Try again," he chuckled. "I'm not that kid anymore." "Exactly, which means you get to draw without needing anyone's approval." He looked at her for a long moment, then picked up the pencil. The first lines trembled, but as the colors spread, something shifted. He wasn't drawing for anyone, he was reclaiming something. That night, Juliet returned to her room. She couldn't sleep. Something inside her stirred, a pulse she couldn't name, but also couldn't silence. A soft knock. Sebastian stood in the doorway, saying nothing. But his eyes spoke. "Juliet," he said quietly, "if you want me to leave, I will. But if you say nothing, I'll stay." She didn't answer. She stepped closer, then closer still. Her hand rose to his cheek, warm, gentle, and heartbreakingly real. They didn't need words. That night, they belonged to each other, not because of a contract, not because of circumstance, but because they had finally found one another in a world that had made them feel so alone. And as he held her, Juliet whispered, "I don't need anyone to leave. I just need the truth." 3 days after the lake house, they returned to San Francisco. The air in the car was quiet, not heavy, just uncertain, like they were each carrying something unnamed but undeniable. Juliet looked out the window, her fingers brushing the note Sebastian had left on her easel their last night at the lake. "Not everyone is worth the risk, but you are." She wasn't sure whether that scared her or gave her hope. Back at the penthouse, the world resumed its rhythm. Calls, meetings, messages, but everything shifted when Juliet received a bouquet of white lilies and a card. "We need to talk. D." Daniel. His name felt like a ghost, rising from some part of her she thought she'd buried. She stared at the card, gripping it tightly. "He reached out, didn't he?" Sebastian asked from across the room. "You knew?" "I guessed." Julie turned to face him. "Is there something I should know?" He paused. "Not right now." Those 3 words cut sharper than any lie. Daniel met her at a quiet cafe near the marina. He was already seated, well-dressed, composed, but his eyes, they held something unsteady. "You look better than I expected," he said. "I thought you'd fall apart." "Did you want that to happen?" Juliet replied coolly. Daniel exhaled and pulled out a large envelope. "Do you know why I really left?" "Because you're a coward." "No, because Sebastian paid me to." Her breath stopped. "He had you followed for months, knew where you painted, who you met, what wine you hated, and when I hesitated, he stepped in and orchestrated the rest." "You're lying." Daniel slid over printed emails, photographs, an invoice from a private investigator. "I'm no saint, Juliet. But I didn't make this mess." She stood abruptly, left everything behind. Back at the penthouse, she said nothing. She placed the documents on the coffee table. Sebastian stepped out of his study and saw her. "It's true," she said. "You had me followed?" He didn't deny it, didn't defend. "I needed to know you were real, not just another person who wanted something from me. And stalking me was your way of finding that out?" Silence. Something cracked in his expression, something even he hadn't prepared for. "I was starting to trust you, Sebastian," she whispered. "I didn't just accept your offer. I believed you were different." Her voice broke, like a thread pulled too tight. "I chose to trust, and that's not something I give easily." She turned away. Each step was a fight against the part of her that still wanted to look back. And this time, the pain wasn't quiet like before. It was loud, cracking, because this time she had let her heart open, and it had been used again. That night she left the penthouse, returned to her old apartment, peeling paint, crooked floorboards, worn-down chair. But it was honest. And honesty was all Juliet craved now. No more illusions, no more rehearsed affections, just someone, anyone, who wouldn't lie. She never expected the truth to come from the last person she thought still cared, Sebastian's father. San Francisco felt colder than usual. The sky was draped in gray, and mist clung to the streets like invisible threads, weaving Juliet's loneliness into every corner. She had stayed in her old apartment for 3 days. No painting, no music, no messages from Sebastian. His silence hurt more than any excuse ever could. That morning, as Juliet reached for her coat to go grab coffee, a knock came at the door. Slow, deliberate. She opened it to find Charles Sterling, Sebastian's father. He stood tall in a brown wool coat, holding a weathered leather briefcase. His eyes weren't cold or proud, just tired. The eyes of a father who had made too many mistakes. "May I speak with you?" he asked. Juliet nodded and stepped aside. "I know Daniel came to you," he began, "and I know you believe him. Once I believed it too, that you were just another artist craving attention, with your eyes on our family's fortune." Her jaw tightened. "But I was wrong," he continued, "and my worst mistake wasn't doubting you, it was paying Daniel to walk away." The air stilled. "Excuse me?" Sebastian didn't buy him off. "I did. I couldn't see you as someone worthy of our name. I forced Daniel to step down, and Sebastian, he stayed silent because he wouldn't betray me." Juliet stood, disbelief washing over her. "But what matters more," Charles said gently, "is this." He opened the briefcase and handed her a leather-bound journal. Its edges were worn, its spine cracked. Sebastian's journal. "He left it at my home 3 years ago." Juliet accepted it slowly, her hands trembling. "Read it. Then decide if he's still the man you want to leave behind." Back in the silence of her apartment, Juliet turned to the first page. May 14, saw a painting today that made me forget to breathe. A girl standing between orange and violet. The world stopped inside that canvas. I asked for the artist's name. They said, Juliet Monroe. July 2, I went to her exhibit, stayed anonymous. She smiled at a boy who asked, "Why are the trees blue?" She said, "Because in your eyes they can be." I envied that freedom and feared it. October 18, Daniel's seeing her. I can't do anything. I just watch from a distance and pray she finds happiness, even if it isn't with me. March 9th, I hired someone to watch her, not out of suspicion. I just needed to know everything about her. She's the only real thing I've ever found in this artificial world. Juliet's vision blurred. April 21. I know Daniel's about to walk away from the wedding. I should feel relief. I don't. I'm terrified for her. I've prepared everything just in case, so I can be the one who steps in and holds her steady in the storm. The final page was a sketch of her. Not glamorous, not poised, just Juliet, sitting on a curb, hair messy, eyes distant. It wasn't from memory, it was from love. Juliet pressed the journal to her chest and cried. That afternoon, she returned to the penthouse. No call, no warning. Sebastian was at the window, staring into the clouds. When he saw her, he stood up quickly, his face unreadable but full of quiet longing. "Did you read it?" she asked. He blinked. "My father gave it to you?" She nodded. "I didn't plan to explain," he said. "You had every right to leave. I was wrong." "Yes," she said, stepping closer. "You were, but your feelings were never a lie." His breath caught. "Juliet, I didn't come back to forgive you. I came back because I believe what you wrote." And then, without hesitation, she stepped into his arms. In that moment, the pain hadn't vanished, but they weren't carrying it alone anymore. Because some truths are worth surviving the storm for. They sat together for a long time, saying nothing, just breathing in the silence that used to divide them. Juliet didn't ask any more questions. The journal had said everything that needed to be said. The quiet between them was no longer distance. It was understanding. And in that fading golden light across the penthouse windows, she knew it was time to stop hiding. Time to stop loving in the dark. 2 weeks later, the Sterling Foundation hosted its annual gala at the Fairmont, a highlight of the year, attended by leaders in finance, art, and media. This year, Juliet had been invited as the guest artist, a first for someone not from a collection or auction house, but someone representing raw, unfiltered expression. Once invitations went out, the media stirred. Her name beside Sebastian's became a headline. Juliet Monroe, real, wife or rebrand strategy. She knew she'd be scrutinized. But this time, she wasn't afraid. That evening, Juliet stepped out of a classic black car, driven by Sebastian himself. She wore a deep sapphire gown off-shoulder, her hair in a soft low bun, no flashy jewelry, no attempt to outshine, which is exactly why she drew every eye in the room. Sebastian held her hand as they entered the grand hall. Conversations hushed, heads turned. Juliet could feel her heart pounding, but Sebastian gave her hand the smallest squeeze, a grounding, wordless gesture. They moved through clusters of guests. The ones who once questioned her now nodded politely. In the corner, Sophia, Sebastian's ex, watched with narrowed eyes, champagne in hand. Juliet offered a faint smile, not out of pride, but peace. Later, as the music dimmed, the MC invited Juliet to the stage as the evening's featured artist. Behind her, a screen displayed her most recent painting. A door flung open to golden light, a man standing in the center of a sunset. His back turned, but his hand extended behind him, waiting for someone to take it. Juliet faced the audience, drew a breath. "I'm not good at speeches, I'm better at feeling things and turning them into color. I used to believe that art was born from loneliness, from building walls to keep yourself safe. But I've learned the most beautiful things come not from fear, but from love. I stand here not just as a painter, but as someone who has learned to trust again." She paused, her gaze finding Sebastian in the crowd, unmoving, watching only her. "There's someone in this room who risked everything to hold on to me, even when he knew I might walk away. He's not perfect, but he's real, and tonight I choose him." Silence fell for a heartbeat. Then applause, soft at first, then sweeping through the room. Sebastian stepped onto the stage. He didn't speak, he just took her hand and kissed the back of it. No further explanation was needed. After the gala, things didn't explode the way Juliet expected. No scandal, no headlines, just one quiet article on an art blog with a simple title, "The Woman Who Made Sebastian Sterling Stay." Juliet didn't finish reading it. She didn't need to. Life between them settled into something slow and unguarded. No more contracts, no more roles. They shared breakfasts by the window, read books side by side on the couch, and coexisted in the way people do when they stop being afraid of being seen. One afternoon, Juliet was painting when she got the email. One of her pieces had been selected for an exhibit in Venice. She screamed with joy, rushing down the stairs. "Where are you?" "Back here," Sebastian called from the garden. She sprinted out, waving the printed email. "They picked my painting! Venice!" He smiled, wide, unfiltered. "I knew they would!" "Knew what?" "That you belong in places like that, where light and art collide." She looked at him then, really looked, and she didn't see a CEO, or the man who once made her doubt everything. She saw the one person who had believed in her before she ever believed in herself. A week later, he took her somewhere new, Yountville, a quiet town tucked in Napa Valley. "Where are we going?" she asked. "I used to think, if one day everything became real, I'd bring you here." "Why here?" "Because it feels like you, still, deep, and worth stopping for." The car pulled up to a small cottage on a hillside. Not lavish, not flashy, but thoughtfully beautiful. They had dinner under string lights in the garden, just the two of them, no music, just the wind and the sound of crickets. When dessert came, a simple fruit tart. Juliet laughed. "You didn't have to try so hard. I'm already happy." Sebastian stood, smoothing his shirt like he was steadying himself. "Juliet," she looked up. "The day I met you, I didn't know it was the beginning of everything I'd been running from. When I offered to marry you that day, I thought I was in control, but I wasn't. I was surrendering. Surrendering to your honesty, your fire, and a kind of strength that no one saw coming." He knelt. Not for show, not for strategy. Just a man in front of the woman he loved, with every soft and unprotected part of his heart. From his pocket, he pulled a ring. Simple, with a message engraved inside. No longer a contract, always a choice. "The first time I asked you to marry me, it was a deal. This time, it's not because I have to. It's because I want to. Juliet Monroe, will you marry me, for real?" She covered her mouth, tears already falling. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will." Sebastian smiled, freer than she'd ever seen him. They held each other, beneath the quiet sky, the stars, and the wind that had waited too long to carry their truth. Years later, Juliet Monroe is still remembered as a unique artist who put raw emotions on canvas. She didn't attend many events, there was no account information, but her paintings always sold out within hours of being put on sale. It's unclear what happened between her and Sebastian. They disappeared from the media after a single article. Love is a picture that is never finished, and that's why we love it. Rumor has it that they lived in northern Italy, in a small house by the lake. Some say they broke up, some believe they are still together. But at an exhibition in Florence, an untitled painting was found. Against a gray blue background, a man is standing in the mist, his back turned, but his hands are still behind him. At the bottom of the frame, there is a single line: "I never stopped choosing you."